Hey there, Alex Kidman with my quick observations and just kind of reactions to Apple's Spring Loaded event, which has just finished as I'm recording this. I'm not working with a script here, it's just my thoughts on what Apple announced this morning. And it's a kind of interesting grab bag because in a certain way, Apple's really just done incremental upgrades. There's a lot of stuff here which is newer, better, faster, which is sort of what you'd expect. But there are some interesting quirks worth thinking about. So, top of mind, as I say, obviously the star of the show are the new iPad Pros, now with the M1 chip. Now, what kind of M1 chip are we getting here? It's an interesting question because Apple announced, of course, nearly 12 months ago that it was going to jump across to Apple Silicon for all of its MacBook lines. That is the M1 chip in essence. But of course, that's all just ARM-based, and it's been doing ARM-based stuff for iPads pretty much forever. So this in some ways might be seen as a bit of a rebranding, but we really don't know enough about the M1 chip in the iPad Pro, beyond the fact that it's quite a bit more powerful. Again, you'd expect that. I mean, some of Apple's claims were a little silly. The whole thing about it being 75% faster in CPU and 1,500 times faster in graphics performance than an original model iPad. Well, the original model iPad, which I did a video on recently, came out in 2010. I'd expect it to be faster. It absolutely should be faster. If it's not faster, something's going badly wrong at Apple HQ. That being said, there are some other new interesting quirks. Look, that 2TB storage option, fascinating, insanely expensive. Here in Australia, a top tier 5G capable 2TB iPad Pro 12.9 will run you $3,549. That's a lot of money to spend on a tablet. I'm sure somebody will. There's also that line of difference between the 12.9 and the 11-inch because previously it used to just basically be about size. The 12.9 was just bigger because, hey, it's 12.9 versus 11. Now, though, you get a much bigger difference because the 12.9 has that Liquid Retina I'll correct myself. Like I said, I'm shooting from the hip. The Liquid Retina XDR display, which runs on mini LEDs, whereas you still get a more traditional style LED LCD display on the 11-inch. So that very much is playing into its kind of pro space thing, but it's really interesting to see Apple differentiating there. The other big point of differentiation here is 5G. 5G is great to have, but critically, rather like the iPhone 12, we're only going to see that millimeter wave, that much faster 5G, in the US. That's based on what Apple's already said. It will be sub-6 everywhere else. Here in Australia, we've only got sub-6 networks, so maybe that's okay. But I think future-proofing would have been good because we will probably see our first millimeter wave networks by the end of this year. I think people are still going to want to be using that iPad Pro by the end of this year. Would have been better. The other catch there, of course, is that while Apple still talks about all-day battery life, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say if you're using 5G all day, it's probably not going to be all-day battery life because we already see that with 5G phones. If you jump into 5G a lot on a 5G phone, the battery life falls off a cliff. I don't expect that to be any different. So what else do we see? Well, we did see a new iPhone 12. Now, that was a little bit unexpected, but of course, before you get too excited, it's just a new colour. It's iPhone 12 in purple, and it seems to only be the 12 and 12 mini, not the Pro variants, and that's interesting too. I quite like the colour, but it's a bit Malibu Stacy's new hat, if you know what I mean. Then there's the new M1 iMacs. And look, again, this was a fairly inevitable thing, fairly widely leaked. Lots of interesting new colours, nice new design, which I do rather like. They've done a couple of interesting, quirky new things here, like throwing the Ethernet port onto the power supply. Again, a little catch to be aware of there is that the entry-level model on these, which have an 8-core CPU but only 7-core GPU, do not have that Ethernet port. And they also don't have USB 3 ports. They've only got Thunderbolt. So you get fewer ports. Again, very Apple play there. The colours are nice. Again, that entry level, you get slightly fewer colours than with the higher level model. But I'm keen to give these a run. The iMacs are a nice, venerable computer, lots and lots of years in the market, and Apple's done interesting things with it over the years. So while I don't see this as a huge game changer, it's a really nice upgrade. What else do we see? Well, Obviously, we saw AirTags. Finally, we saw AirTags. And look, if you're familiar with Tile, well, this is the Apple take on it. There's discoverability. You can find it. It'll use Bluetooth locally. It'll use the Find My network if you lose your phone out of the shops or you lose whatever you've attached your AirTag to. They'll run $45 each here in Australia or $149 for a 3-pack. So obviously, you're going to want to attach an AirTag to something you have some value to. Apple also announced a somewhat surprising update to the Apple TV 4K. Now, visually, this is their set-top box, not their subscription TV service. The Apple TV 4K is pretty long in the tooth by set-top box standards, and the big news here, partially, is the inclusion of the A12 Bionic under the hood. Now, that does allow for things like high frame rate HDR on titles, as long as your TV is going to support that as well, of course. That's the little catch there. What's interesting here more is the color matching, which will allow you to calibrate your TV without actually having to go into your TV's calibration menus. Instead, you'll use an iPhone effectively as a kind of color sensor. That'll then tell the Apple TV, hey, calibrate this way because this is what this TV is putting out. Catch there, of course, is that will only calibrate for the Apple TV. So if you switch to your PlayStation or your Xbox or any other kind of input, you're going to jump into a different visual quality. I'm not going to say it's going to be better or worse. It's just going to look different if you look at the same content on both. And these kinds of things can be very personal. I don't doubt that Apple has its color technology ducks lined up in a very, very nice row, but some people actually find those calibrations better. Some people find them worse. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. The other big thing they did, of course, with the Apple TV that I love is an actual proper remote. The Apple TV 4K remote is just a house of pain. That touch thing just irritates me because it just really doesn't work very well. The new one has more buttons, it has power, it has a scroll wheel, which is very kind of old school iPod, although it's not actually a scroll wheel, it's a touch zone, but it's acting like a scroll wheel. But I appreciate the fact that they've said, hey, look, the old one wasn't so good, we've made a better one. I mean, they haven't said the old one wasn't so good, of course. This is Apple, it never admits its mistakes, but they've essentially said, here is an improvement, here is how you make this remote better and more appealing. It's an odd move, though, of course, because Apple TV Plus, the subscription side, is now available across just about everything. Smart TVs and other set-top boxes and consoles and so on. So the Apple TV 4K always felt like a kind of side project to Apple. Really interesting to see them pushing it a little harder. Apple did also announce an Apple Card family option, but that's US only. Here in Australia, we do not get Apple Card as yet, as well as a redesign of the Podcasts app with some subscription options. Could be really, really interesting. I suppose I should plug the fact that I do a weekly podcast called Vertical Hold, which you really should check out and subscribe to today there. That's pretty much it. I've got to go start chasing Apple for some review gear so I can actually give some more in-depth analysis on this. Thanks for watching. What did you find interesting about the Spring Loaded event? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.